Hello, my name is Elaine Weiss, the author of The Woman's Hour, The Great Fight to Win the Vote, and I'm delighted to be your teacher in Suffrage School today. I'd like to share with you two of my favorite items from the Schlesinger digital collections, a pair of photographs made during the campaign for ratification of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The suffragists had worked for 40 years to get the Susan B. Anthony Amendment through Congress. They finally succeeded in June of 1919, and then the amendment went out to the states for ratification. 36 states were needed to approve. Alice Paul, leader of the National Woman's Party, the smaller but more radical American suffrage group, created the ratification banner to chart the progress of the amendment, stitching a cloth star as each state ratified. Here, in this photo from the Sue Shelton White Papers at Schlesinger, Paul personally sews another star onto the banner, surrounded by her loyal lieutenants at Women's Party headquarters in Washington, including Sue Shelton White and Anita Pulitzer, both of whom I write about in my book, so you can understand why I really like this photo. Paul, a master of imagery and public spectacle, tapped into classic American patriotic iconography for this posed scene, which was widely distributed in the press. It harkens back to Betsy Ross sewing 13 state stars on the first U.S. flag. Of course, women were given no voice or representation in the new nation celebrated by Ross's flag, but the 19th Amendment promised to correct that omission, and Paul's banner was presented as the modern symbol of a more democratic nation. The image also offered a sly commentary on women's traditional domestic role. Here was Alice Paul, fearless suffrage campaigner and political agitator, who'd been arrested and imprisoned numerous times for her public protests at the gates of the White House, turning the tables on women's place in the domestic sphere by transforming sewing into an act of political theater and defiance. The first wave of state ratifications rolled in fast and the stars kept pace, but then the ratification slowed. The star sewing became less frequent. Almost all the southern states rejected the amendment. No stars for them. The endgame was the toughest. In March of 1920, Paul was able to sew the 35th star for Washington state onto the banner. Only one more state was needed for full ratification, but months went by, bringing only defeats and disappointments. Finally, the possible 36th state emerged, Tennessee, and the decisive ratification battle unfolded there, and it was a fight for the ages. The outcome remained uncertain until the very last moments, but on August 18th, 1920, Tennessee did, by a terrifyingly small margin, ratify the 19th Amendment. Alice Paul, waiting anxiously in Washington, received word of the victory from her staff in Nashville. The 36th and final star was quickly stitched onto the ratification banner, and in a carefully rehearsed ceremony captured in this photograph from the Alice Paul Papers at Schlesinger, Paul unfurled the completed ratification banner from the balcony of Women's Party headquarters to the cheers and applause of her staff below. The photo captures Paul's expression at this historic moment: relief, vindication, and intense determination to move on to the next phase of her campaign for women's rights, another constitutional amendment, the Equal Rights Amendment, introduced into Congress in 1923.